They say that 99% of the internet is not accessible to traditional browsers. The world that lives beneath that which we see when we visit the dark web contains things which defy normal understanding. It has become a breeding ground to all of man's most perverse and dark fantasies. It's a place where chaos reigns supreme. My mother is not an extremely savvy internet user. In fact, most of the time she has little to no idea what she is doing on there. If she is in someone else's YouTube account or Gmail, she often does what she is trying to do without paying attention to whose credentials she is using. Can you blame her though? Her generation didn't grow up with computers. They are severely disadvantaged when it comes to that kind of stuff. I, on the other hand, somewhat pride myself on being knowledgeable about computers and the internet. I don't know how I would live my life without the opportunities it affords me. One could easily assume then that I would be someone who takes an interest in the dark web, and believe me, it's not for the faint of heart. Now the thing is that I am very careful with what I do. I use a great VPN service and I know what I can and can't click in order to not expose my IP address to anyone. After years of doing this though, I did however become a bit too careless, and it just so happens at the time I did, I was on my mum's computer. I was hanging with my family during the holidays and I got into an argument with my little brother Tommy about a certain listing that I had seen on a dark net market search. He's always been a bit of a sheltered kid, considering he has a cleft lip and my parents baby him like a toddler. So I figured it was my responsibility to show him some of the real world every once in a while. I had told him about this listing for a clown that you could hire for birthday parties that was for some reason being advertised on the dark web, and he of course didn't believe me. So I showed him the listing, and we read about how the clown would provide your party with an exceptional experience, one that you would likely never forget. Considering my knowledge of the dark web, I was pretty sure it was not an experience you would want to remember. After I showed him, I got distracted and went about my business doing other things. Somehow though, I left my browser window open on my mum's computer. This was hands down the worst, most careless slip up of my life, one that I will likely never live down. After I was done on there, she used the laptop, and thinking that the clown was something my little brother wanted to do for his birthday, she went ahead and paid for him to come visit the house. After I found out what she had done, we tried to cancel it. But I guess it didn't work, because that weekend a clown car pulled up out front of our house for Tommy's birthday. Out of the car stepped an old man in traditional clown makeup with these pale bluish white eyes like those of a blind person, yet he seemed to be able to walk up the driveway totally fine. My mum was very freaked out and had my dad go meet him in the driveway. When my dad approached him, he tried to shake his hand, but instead the clown just immediately pulled out 3 juggling balls and started tossing them up effortlessly. My dad stared at him for a moment in awe, then began to guide him around the side yard into the back, where the rest of the party guests were. I was definitely a bit worried, so I went to the backyard and the clown was already setting up for a magic show. The guy looked freaky as hell, but everyone in the crowd seemed okay with it. So I suppose I was being too judgmental. Plus he had a name tag on that said Noisy, and considering he hadn't said a word the whole time, I thought that was pretty funny. For the first trick, Noisy took a quarter out and he pretended like it disappeared in his hand. Then he reached out around the back of his head and pulled the quarter out from behind his ear. It was a pretty basic trick, but then he kept going with it. He pulled out quarter after quarter from behind his ear until there was a pile of change, at least a few inches high on the ground beside him. Everyone in the yard seemed impressed when they saw this. It really was an incredible trick. Then he picked up the pile of change off of the ground and put it in his shirt. Then he held the shirt up with 2 fingers and launched the coins up into the air, only nothing flew out. The change had totally disappeared, and in its place, a bunny rabbit popped out. The crowd really got into this. A few of them even got up and started putting money in his tip jar. Then Noisy extended his hand out and pointed to Tommy. Tommy smiled, excited to have been acknowledged, and stepped up. Noisy then pulled out one of the huge bubble-making ones and had Tommy stand in this round tray of soap on the ground. Noisy then lowered the wand over Tom and lifted it back up quickly, covering him in a gigantic bubble. This was not an ordinary bubble though. It would not pop no matter what. Tommy would hit the sides of it and it wouldn't break. Everyone in the audience stared at this, speechless. Clearly they were watching something that wasn't possible occurring before their eyes. After a few seconds of being trapped inside, Tommy started to freak out and thrash against the side of the bubble. He began screaming and crying and panicking. "Hey, let him out!" my dad yelled as he started approaching the clown. Noisy then looked over at him and put his finger to his lip, shushing him. He then lifted the wand up above my brother's head and quickly brought it down over him. The bubble instantly disappeared, and so did Tommy. Frantic, my dad charged towards Noisy, but just before he could get to him, the clown brought the bubble wand down over himself and vanished as well. My dad screamed frantically, looking around for the 2 of them. Realising the gravity of the situation, the crowd began to stand up and try to help my dad look for them. Then we heard a car start up in the driveway. Several of us sprinted to the front yard and saw the clown car pulling out and taking off down the street. My dad and I, along with several others, got into our cars and peeled out, chasing after him. Then the clown car turned a corner, and by the time we got there, it had vanished. Upon the realization that we had lost him, my dad immediately broke down in tears, screaming and pounding on the steering wheel. I had never seen him get like that before, and I knew it was all my fault. The following weeks were some of the worst I had experienced. Constant contact with the police and interviews, where everyone was relentlessly asking me about why I was on the dark web and what I knew about my little brother's disappearance. I honestly feel like I was lucky they didn't pin the entire thing on me and just close the case. I didn't stop going on the dark web though. In fact, I started using it more. I knew that if there was any way I was going to find my brother's kidnapper, it wasn't going to be using the old-fashioned police detective model. I had to track Noisy down once he decided to stalk again. So, I created various fake identities on numerous darknet markets and made posting after posting for birthday party clowns to come perform at my son's party. Then finally, after several weeks of doing this, I got a response. Only, it wasn't from Noisy. It was from another old man dressed as a clown who included a picture of himself in the posting with his response. The weirdest thing was the old man had a cleft lip and looked just like my little brother, only he had aged at least 50 years. I was really freaked out by this and had to know more, but after I posted several times for him to meet me, I think he could tell I was trying to trick him because he would never show up. I'm going to continue to look for him as long as I can, but I think he knows it's me, and for some reason, he doesn't want to be found. Once when I was 7, I had a family gathering at my house. The adults downstairs suggested my cousins and I go upstairs and find something to do. We went upstairs to play on the Wii, but my cousins got bored and asked to do something else. I suggested a board game, and they groaned and said I was boring. I asked them what they wanted to do. One of my cousins got up and asked, "Do you have an attic?" Then the rest looked at me and smiled. Yeah, why? My cousins began to jump. One of my cousins suggested we go explore it. At first I refused. I thought that we could cause a mess or maybe one of us might get hurt. My cousins kept begging me to go. I went downstairs to ask my older sister. She was talking with the adults. When I asked her, she said, "I don't care, just get out of here before Mum comes." I went back up. I took my cousins to our attic. I felt uneasy, but everyone seemed to be having a good time, so I tried to lighten up. We came across old things, albums, rotary dial telephone, old music discs, etc. I suggested we get out since there wasn't anything to do here. Just as we were about to go, someone dropped a box. I picked it up. "I'm sorry, I just wanted to see what was inside, but there was no key." I was kind of mad, but we were leaving anyway, so it didn't matter. I noticed the lock had broke. "There was no keys. I'm sorry." There was a jar of keys around, but he was a little slow to even ask. He was only 4, so I didn't go hard on him. I heard my cousin from behind me ask what was inside. I shrugged. I didn't know, but I most certainly didn't care. They asked me to open it. Knowing there was a lock, obviously it was not meant to be opened. However, they made me curious, so I opened it eventually. There was a book. It was thin and really dusty. Then there was a Boy Scout patch that had Patrol Leader on it. There was also some old glasses. Then there was a picture of my great-great-uncle when he was a kid, in his Boy Scout uniform, with a circle drawn in marker next to him. I thought it was a bit weird. I turned the picture over and it had my uncle's name on it. No one talked about my great-great-uncle because he was crazy, so he lives in a retirement home far away. My cousin took out a smaller box within the box. "Do not open" were written in black marker on the box. My cousin ignored it and opened it. I thought he was crazy because the box obviously said to not open it. "What are you doing? We're not supposed to open it," I told him. He just shrugged. There was another box in the box, but a bit smaller, and again with the do not open warning. My cousin kept opening it. Every time he opened one of the boxes, he uncovered another smaller box with the same warning. At last he opened the last box. There was a note and something wrapped in wrapping paper. I read the note. "Do not open, do not open, do not open." My youngest cousins began to cry because they were scared. My cousin didn't care and teared the wrapping paper. In it was a small glass bottle. It was empty. My cousin teased us for being scared of an empty bottle. He took off the lid and the door closed. We all screamed and my cousin dropped the bottle. A glowing light appeared and we were blinded by it. I couldn't see anything, but I heard my cousin screaming for the last time. When the light disappeared, my cousin was gone. My younger cousin was crying on the floor. "Where is he?" I was shaking at that moment. Everyone looked confused. Who? When I said my cousin's name, everyone looked confused. My cousin rolled her eyes. Whatever. Do you have bandages? Connor fell down. I looked at him and told them to go to the bathroom. They all left and I stayed behind. I looked at the box that my cousin opened before he had disappeared. I opened the book. The warning that was on the box was also written all over the first page. On the next page I read, "Ben is real, Ben is real, Ben is real." Those words were written everywhere on the page. I started breaking into tears. Then I went to the next page. This time there wasn't complete sentences. Glowing light, Ben is gone. No one knows Ben. No one remembers. My heart sank. Then on the next page, I am not crazy. I know Ben was real. I am not crazy. I am not crazy. And that was the last page in the book with writing. My mother called us down to eat. I ran downstairs and asked my mother if she remembered my cousin. She said I was talking nonsense. I started asking adults, but no one remembered. During dinner I felt uneasy. I was the only one who remembered. Dinner was silent. "Who's Ben?" I asked. My heart was beating so fast. The adults looked in confusion. My grandmother sighed. "I haven't heard that name since your great-great-uncle." Everyone laughed. He was really crazy. He would scream at us because no one knew who Ben was. One of my aunts said this with a look of pity. I looked at my mother in shock. "Oh honey, stop worrying. Your uncle was delusional. He spent most of his time at camp. The wilderness probably got to his head." I cleared my throat. "What happened to him?" They shook their heads. "Nothing worked, not even medicine. So he spent all day in his room. Then we sent him to a retirement home." My grandmother clicked her tongue. "Can we go see him?" When I asked, everyone stopped moving. "Gosh, honey, he died 3 years ago. Sorry." My aunt had a face of sympathy. When everyone left, I couldn't sleep that night. I didn't want to tell anyone. I was afraid. My cousin and all the evidence of his existence was gone. He left no track. Not even his siblings or parents remembered him. But I know I'm not crazy. He is real. I never went back to the attic. I wanted and tried so hard to forget about him, but I couldn't. I kept my uncle's book and wrote in it, "I believe you, uncle. You are not crazy." I sealed the book and hid it away. I do not know what caused Ben's or my cousin's disappearance, but I do know that it wasn't something normal. Pay attention to warnings. They are given for a reason. Not all crazy people are crazy. I am not crazy. My cousin was real. Do not open the box. Do not open the box.